Okay, so in this module, we will install and we will configure SharePoint 2016. If you have ever installed SharePoint 2013 and the 2010, then almost you will figure out that you will install in a very similar fashion, except as I mentioned in my first module that in SharePoint 2016, we have a min role option. So that will be a change while you will be installing SharePoint. Okay, you can install SharePoint using the GUI. We will install 2016 using the graphical interface. Then you can install SharePoint using the scripting. Okay, although there are very rare chances that you will ever install SharePoint using the script, but you can install that. And then once SharePoint is installed, then you will configure SharePoint farm. Okay, so let's start. Number one, we will learn about the accounts, the number of accounts required for the installation of SharePoint, because there will be multiple accounts for the multiple purposes. Then we will figure out some of the prerequisites required for the 2016. Okay, then we will, we will use SQL Server. So rather than using the direct names of SQL Server, it is a recommended way of using aliases. Okay, so you will see how to create alias in SQL Server or on your front-end servers. Okay, then I will not talk about too much about this option tracking the installation, because normally nobody takes care, but nobody give anything about the tracking the installations. Okay, so I will not go into the detail. I will just give you an idea. Language packs, yes, very important one, because it's not necessary that we have our sites in English only or in French only. Probably we may functionalities, or we may sites where we need, or we need to show, or we need to display our content in multiple languages. Okay, so users should be able to view the content in their own language, okay, in their native language. So probably I can create a site for English, for French, for German. Okay, so that site will be available in multiple languages. So in that case, I will be required to install different language packs. Then finally, we will install the topology, whatever topology we will decide, and then we will go for the configuration. We can perform configuration using the configuration wizard, or we can perform these configuration manually. Okay, so I will show you both how to perform using the wizard and how to perform using the manual configuration. Number one, some accounts. Okay, we need account for SharePoint, we need account for SQL Server, and we create all these accounts in Active Directory. Now think about a scenario. This is our scenario. For example, we will have a server. It's a very bad server, so let me change the color of our server. For example, this is our server, and this will be SharePoint server. Okay, then in order to store the content, we will use, let's say, SQL Server. Both are different servers, okay, but on a same network. So what we will do, or what we do normally whenever we install SQL Server, it is recommended that you use domain account for the services of SQL Server as a service accounts for of SQL Server. Okay, let me show you this very quickly. For example, in this case, we have this database server. Let me log in on this database server. And if I open SQL Server Configuration Manager, oops, sorry, clicked on a wrong one. If I open okay, here is SQL Server Configuration Manager. So in SQL Server Configuration Manager, you will find that these are the different running services. Whenever you install SQL Server, there are some services installed behind the scene. This is a service for the main database engine. Okay, this is the service for the browser service. This is for the agent service. Currently, only the database engine service is working because we are not interested in using agent service or any other service. Okay, now ideally, when you install SharePoint, then you install when you install SQL Server, or especially when you want to use SQL Server on networks, so it is a good idea to always use domain account for these services. Okay, if I, let's say, go to the properties. So currently it is using an account, but this account is not a domain account. This is the default Windows account, one of the Windows accounts, by the way. And you do not have any control on this particular account. You cannot set the permissions or the rights for that particular account, because this account is owned by and created by Windows operating system. Okay, so this is a anti-service account, and then you have the local system account, these kind of accounts. So the recommended way is that whenever you are installing SQL Server, or you are using SQL Server in a production environment or in your environment, so do not rely on these built-in accounts. Always create your own account in Active Directory, a very normal one. No specific permissions will be required for that account, and then use that particular account in SQL services. Okay, this is the number one. Although these are the Microsoft labs, so Microsoft installed SQL Server using this particular account, but this is, I would say, this is not a good practice. And as a good practice, you always use your own account. Okay, number one. So this was the number one, SQL Server service account. So always create some service account in Active Directory and use that service account for the services. Even you can use, you should use a different account for the agent service, different account for the main DB engine service, database engine service. Okay, this is the recommended way. Then we need another user, which is known as setup user account. The setup user account means an account who will install SharePoint. Okay, so that is known as setup user account. Once again, this account must be the account of Active Directory. Okay, because you cannot install SharePoint in this situation, because you have a separate server for SharePoint and a separate server for SQL Server. So these are two different machines on your network. So in order to communicate between these two machines, you need a domain account. Okay, so you will ask your network team or whoever is managing Active Directory to create an account for the installation of SharePoint. Okay, no special rights will be required for that particular account. Okay, it shouldn't be it should not be any domain administrator or anything like that. It will be a very simple account. Okay, however, all you will do, you will provide this simple account. Let me name this account, for example, SP install. Let's say that that was my account. Although in lab, we will not use this account, we will use some other account. Okay, so let's say this was my account, SP install. It was the account I asked my AD administrator to kindly create for the installation of SQL, for the installation of SharePoint. So what I will do, when I will try to install, or when I would like to install SharePoint, so I will log in on this particular SharePoint server using this account, SP install account. There is one requirement that this account should be the part of local admin group of this server. Okay, so that's what if that's not the local admin group part, so it won't be able to perform any installation. So that is why you will make this particular account a local admin, the part of local admin on this particular server. Okay, only on this particular server. Okay, second thing, because you will be performing installation using this particular account, so this account will be required some rights on SQL Server as well. Okay, so this is our SQL Server. Let me give it some color as well. So this is our SQL Server. Okay, this is the SQL Server. Okay, so you will be required to provide some permissions on SQL Server for to this particular account. Okay, and what those permissions will be, what you will be required to, let me close this one quickly. Let me open SQL Server. Okay, this time I will open SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, I will connect using this particular account. For example, it's a database administrator account, for example. So in SQL Server, what you will do, you will create a login. Okay, because if you want to authenticate any user in SQL Server, so you create login for that user in SQL Server. Okay, so you will create login for SP install account, number one. So let me show you, although there is no SP install, so it wouldn't be there. However, let's say I will simply search my user and I will create my account. One special thing, okay, the kind of rights that particular account will be required on your server, you will come to this server role, and in this server role, that particular user will be required DB creator rights and security admin rights. Okay, so whoever or whichever account or whichever user will try to install SharePoint, that user must have these two permissions on your SQL server. Okay, What if that user do not have this permission, DB creator permission? So what will happen, by the way? And why why DB creator permission is required to this user? Its role is to install SharePoint. Its job is to install only SharePoint. Why is it required DB creator permission on SQL Server? Anyone, please?
Part of the installation of SharePoint is creating the content databases and all the other databases that are part of the application.
Yep, perfect. The part of SharePoint installation is to create farm configuration database. Okay, so if that user who will be installing SharePoint does not have those permission, so the installation will not be possible simply. Okay, so make sure your user, whoever will try to install SharePoint, have these two permissions on your database. Okay, once again, what normally we do, or not what normally people do, they say, let's make him sysadmin. Now, sysadmin means in SQL Server that that particular user have any kind of permission on SQL Server. Okay, so probably if you are the custodian of SharePoint and you are the custodian of SQL Server and you are looking for networks, okay, so in those situations, yes, you can do anything because you are responsible for the entire environment, entire network, entire solution. But it usually doesn't happen. Okay, because there will be some database team out there, there will be some network team out there, and they will ask you specifically what kind of permissions will be required for this particular account, why those permissions are required. Okay, so you should have a very clear idea to let them know that because SharePoint needed these kind of permission for accounts. Okay, so one thing. So you have your service account, number one, then you have your installation account. You have these two accounts. Number three, you have a farm server account. You will require a farm server account. It will be the account who will be responsible for the SharePoint farm. Okay, and what normally we do, we create another user in SharePoint in Active Directory with this name normally. Okay, SP farm. So I can very clearly identify this user that it's a SharePoint user and it is used for the farm. But once again, you can name anything. Okay, whatever your company policies and the patterns are. So we use SP farm account. And once again, it will be a very normal user. No particular rights or permissions will be required for this particular account. Okay, and when you will be installing SharePoint, or that at one stage, SharePoint will ask you to provide the SP farm account, or the account who will be responsible for the farm. So at that stage, we will provide this SP farm account. Then we have application pool accounts. Some more users will be required. For example, I normally use a username. For example, SP content. Okay. All these pool accounts are required for web applications. Okay, because we will create different web applications. We will create different service applications. So these different kind of pool accounts, application pool accounts, will be required for those service applications. It's not necessary that you create that you always create a separate pool account for each web application or for each service application. We can reuse these accounts as well. Okay. What's the job of application pool account? Let's say we have a SharePoint server, okay, and there is a user, for example, in our scenario, who will try to access SharePoint. Let's assume that it's our user, okay, or there is a good user. Oh, there is a user. Okay, so we have a user, and this user will try to access SharePoint at some stage. Okay, it will access any URL. So when he will access any URL, which means he wants to see something, SharePoint will contact to this SQL server. Okay, and in order to contact to this SQL server, SharePoint will use this particular content account, okay, or the pool account of that particular web application. So that is the job of application pool accounts in SharePoint. Okay, so generally we have these kind of accounts. Good idea, always create separate service accounts for SQL services. Do not run your SQL services under the predefined or the built-in Windows accounts, because you do not have any control on these accounts. Number two, use or create a normal SP or a normal account that will be used for the installation of SharePoint. This account should have the database permissions, like the DB creator and the security admin permissions. It should be the part of those server roles. Number three, you will create an you will create a SP farm account. That account will be used to create the overall farm. And by the way, the central admin website, basically in SharePoint, that is also a web application. Okay, so that website, the pool account of that website is this SP farm. Okay, usually the farm account is known as the pool account of that central admin website. Okay, then you will create or may create multiple pool accounts whenever you will be creating any web application. So you will specify the pool account, number one, while you will be creating the web application in SharePoint. And number two, when you will be creating service applications like the search, the user profile, these kind of application. So you will be required application pool accounts. Okay, I'm making a statement at this moment that when you will use these accounts for the web application and the service applications, all the pool accounts must be, all these accounts must be managed accounts in SharePoint. Okay, remember that, and I will explain this while we will be installing SharePoint. So these are the accounts that we usually use in order to install SharePoint. One setting on database. Okay, on a server level in SQL Server, if I right click and I come to the properties, make sure that in advance, max DOP or max degree of parallelism, okay, is set to 1. This is the requirement for SharePoint, by the way. Okay, and if you do that, SharePoint's performance are quite enhanced. Okay, so it is not mentioned anywhere. So make sure whenever you create databases, or you use database SQL Server databases for SharePoint, always set this option. One more advice, that do not use your SQL Server database, or do not share your SQL Server your SharePoint's SQL Server instance with other applications. It is not recommended. Okay, which means probably you have this one server and you are using this server for the SharePoint. So it is not advisable to use the similar database or the similar server or the similar instance of SQL Server for your payroll or for your HR or for your other any kind of system. Okay, it is not recommended because sometimes those systems makes their own changes in SQL Server, and those changes sometimes create conflicts with the SharePoint. Okay, so however, if you want to use SQL Server on the same machine, so you can install another SQL Server on this machine and you can use that particular instance for other applications. Okay, so keep your SharePoint SQL Server separate from rest of the applications. Okay, so we have all these accounts. So let's move forward. The first thing that you will do when you will insert the media, basically it is used to run your queries in multiple processors, and probably SharePoint doesn't like that due to any reason. Parallel computing. Okay. Let's say you have a media, SharePoint media, you will simply insert that media, or you will simply use that media in SharePoint. And the first thing you will do, you will simply use this prerequisite installation. Okay, in that in your media, you will find the prerequisite installer. Okay, and this is the first thing that you will run inside the in your SharePoint installation, because without the prerequisites installation, you cannot install SharePoint. Okay, there are multiple things which this prerequisite installs. There are different kind of components, some SQL network libraries and these kind of things. Those will be installed. The most simplest way is to make sure your computer is connected with the internet, and you just run the prerequisite installer. That's it. Okay, rest of the thing this installer will perform on its own. Okay, no need to interact with it. It will keep installing all those things. As soon as the installation is completed, probably it will ask you to restart the server, or if you selected the automatic restart, it will restart the server. And if your server is ready or everything is installed, then you can run the setup to install SharePoint or to configure SharePoint. Okay, so this is the easiest way, by the way. But sometime, let's say the internet access is not allowed on in your data center due to some policies. So what you can do, you can simply install those prerequisites on some other server, on some other computer using the internet. Okay, you can find out very quickly prerequisites for the SharePoint. So you will go to that site from Microsoft and you will simply download all those prerequisites, and you can install these prerequisites using the command lines as well. Okay, this is also a possibility. So what you will do, you will simply do, for example, you will simply store all your prerequisites in a folder, and then you will install your prerequisites from there. So let me give you an idea about that. However, I always say that I need a internet. Okay. Unfortunately, we do not have installation media in these labs. Microsoft has done some of the work already in these labs, so we do not have any media for that purpose. But let me give you an idea. So you will use this command prompt. For example, you have your media, and in that media you have the prerequisite installer. You have downloaded all the prerequisites, and probably you have placed somewhere on a network, or probably you have copied all those prerequisites somewhere in computer. So what you can do, you can say, for example, let's say you can say. You want to install, give me a moment. I can install something like this if the spellings are correct. Okay, okay, you will use that prerequisites installation command. Okay, I'm not using the exact spelling. I'm just giving you an idea. Let's say you will use that prerequisite installer. Okay, then you will specify you want to install, for example, this component SQL LI, which means SQL library. Okay, client library, colon, and then you will specify the path. Where is it located? Okay, server path or whatever path, C colon backslash, wherever this component is currently residing or currently stored. Okay, so this way you can install all your prerequisites one by one, just in case there was no internet connection available on that server where you wanted to install SharePoint. So you downloaded all those components and then you install these components one by one. Okay. Or what you can do one more thing. Uh, Rather than writing all these commands one by one, what you can do, you can create one single file. Let's say, let me open this. What you will do, you will create a one notepad file. Okay, a text file. And inside this text file, you will write all your commands. Okay, which means, let's say, you want to install slash switch. I'm not writing the name slash switch slash wherever it is available. Okay, so you will create one single file for that rather than using or installing one by one. You can create this particular file. The name of this particular file must be, for example, if I save this file, the name of this particular file should be prerequisite installer. Okay, dot argument.txt. It should be the name of that file, txt. We call this file argument file. Okay, and rather than writing those arguments one by one, we write all the arguments within this file. Okay, and make sure when you will write those arguments, you will write on a one single line. You will not use enter in this line. Okay, so all the switches must be written on a one single line within this argument file. Okay, at least later stage, I will sometimes show you the argument file, or give me a moment if I can find, give me a moment. Let me use copy paste. I try to do that. Okay. Okay, so probably I will create a file like this. Okay, for example, I want to install this. Okay, where is the path? So I will specify the path of that one. The second one is this, the third one is that. Okay, so this way, using the slash switches, I will specify all my prerequisites on a one single line. Okay, and once this file is saved, so I can use prerequisites installer just to run this file rather than using um, uh, my one rather than installing these things one by one. Okay, when you have this file, by the way, and when you run the prerequisite installation. Okay, so what SharePoint will do, SharePoint will automatically pick this file and it will run all those prerequisites installer from the operating system. Okay, you will simply run prerequisite installer.exe. The SharePoint will automatically find out this file and it will simply install all those prerequisites. Okay. How you can make sure whether the prerequisites were installed completely or not. It's very simple. If the prerequisites will not be installed successfully, it will generate a log for you. So you can see you would be able to go and you would be able to see the log. Or probably if you rerun the prerequisite installer and everything was installed perfectly, so it will show you everything is installed. Okay, so option is there, but once again I would say that most probably that you will have internet connection available on server, and in that case just double click on prerequisite installer. Rest is the problem of SharePoint. Okay, so always remember, without prerequisite installer you cannot install SharePoint. So let's say prerequisite installer is installed. By the way, in your lab, prerequisite prerequisites are already installed. Okay, Microsoft has done that thing. So the next thing is that the configuration of SQL Server client aliases. Okay, it's a good idea to create an alias for SQL Server rather than using the direct name of SQL Server. Okay, so we can create these aliases on our front-end servers, on each front-end server. So while you will be installing SharePoint, you will not specify the actual server name. You will use the alias name in your connection. Okay, so in future, if there is a change, so you will make change in your alias or the behind the scene, but you will not make no change will be required inside the SharePoint, because SharePoint will be using that particular alias, and it will point to that particular alias only. Okay, in case of hard coding server names, so there might be a change required for that. How do we create those aliases, by the way? Just give you an example. Uh, Let me go to my SP1. From here, you would be able to change your SQL, your server from one server to another one. Okay, in order to create aliases, come to this drive C. Inside the drive C, Windows. In Windows, you will have system 32 and syswow 64, 32-bit version and the 64-bit version. Normally we create aliases for both 32-bit as well as 64-bit. So let's say if I come to this system 32, okay, here I will find a file name. Let me find out the file. The file name is, okay, con, just give me a moment, conc, that is CLI, yeps. Okay, this is the file name. Okay, CLI confg, client configuration. So you will run this command, and inside this command you will create the alias. Okay, for example, I will create the alias for TCP/IP. So I will select the TCP/IP. Okay, then let's say I will enable this one in alias. I will add an alias. Okay, you will name it anything. For example, let me name it SQL underscore demo alias. Okay, or whatever you name it. Okay, network libraries, you will use definitely the TCP library. Here you will specify your database server name simply. Okay, and when you will be installing SharePoint, so instead of using the server name, because whatever my server name will be, let's say SQL-001 or whatever this name is, for example, here is the name. Okay. So whatever my database server is, in this case, that is nyc-db1. So I will use this server name here. So I will create the alias for 32-bit as well as for 62-bit. Okay, so once both the aliases are created, so when I will be using my configuration wizard, so at that time, or when I will be installing SharePoint, so at that time, I will use the alias name instead of server name. Okay, this is a good practice always. Okay, do not use your hard-coded server names in SharePoint. Always use your alias names. Okay, I was using TCP/IP. So if I wanted to use TCP/IP, I will have to make sure one thing. Once again, on database server, I will run SQL Server Configuration Manager. Inside the SQL Server Configuration Manager, I will check few things. Client protocols. Okay, TCP/IP is enabled. Good. Okay. TCP/IP is disabled for this. So I will enable this TCP/IP. Sorry, I will go to properties and simply enable yes. Okay, and it will be required a service restart. Okay, so I will restart the service. So make sure, because when I will be creating the alias, or when I was trying to create an alias, so I was using the TCP/IP protocol. Okay, so make sure the TCP/IP protocol is enabled so that your client would be able to connect with SQL Server using the TCP/IP protocol. Okay, so that protocol is enabled this time. Okay. Okay, so you will perform these steps in your lab once again. During the installation, you will create the client, you will create these aliases for 32-bit as well as 64-bit. if you need to create these aliases on SQL Server, then you can use SQL Server Configuration Manager as well. Okay, so if you do not want to use this particular library, so probably you will have to install SQL Server client tools on every computer. Okay, so no need for that. You can simply use this SQL Client Network Utility option on your front-end servers. Remember one thing, while you will be, okay, that's later on. Okay, I'm not going into the detail of tracking these installation. By the way, the purpose of this is that, let's say if your network people probably, or your Active Directory domain controller, Active Directory domain administrator, he wants to track the installation of SharePoint, how many times SharePoint has been installed, or probably if they want to block the installation of the SharePoint, so they can do Active Directory they can create some attributes in using the ADSI edit program, and they can create a URL for that purpose. So I'm not going into the detail of that. Actually, nobody takes care of that. Okay, the language pack, as I discussed, that if you wanted to create your sites in multiple languages, so you will have to require to download all the language packs, and then you install those language packs. By the way, before installing those language packs, make sure those language packs are installed at a Windows level. Okay, in Windows you have those languages available, and then you will download and you will install those language packs on every front-end server in SharePoint, because they will be using different kind of templates to show different kind of language sites. Now, normally people think that if you install these language packs and you want to create, let's say, a site in English and in French, for example, so you will create a content in English and that will be automatically translated into French. That's not the case. Okay, there is no content translation, by the way, from English to some other language. That's not the job of these language packs. The job of these language pack is to show the overall template, the predefined template of Microsoft's in different languages. That's the whole purpose of these languages. Okay, and once these languages are installed, so for example, if you installed a French language pack or Arabic language pack, for say, let's say, so you would be able to see the predefined templates or the site templates, like the publishing site template or the team site template in different languages. Okay, but if you wanted to translate your content in other language, then you will have to perform a job. I mean, there will be a content translator. You will create something in English and then you will send a request to that content translator to kindly translate that thing in French, so that the content is available in English and French as well. Or probably you can use the Microsoft's translation service, which is available online. I'm not sure about how precise or how exact translation that will be, but the service is available. Okay, so don't assume that it will automatically translate everything. It will not translate anything for you. Okay, it will only install the language packs so that the site templates are available in different languages. Just for the information, if you want to use or you want to create multilingual sites in SharePoint, then there is a feature known as variation. You will have to use that variation feature in order to create multilingual sites. Okay, what will be your installation topology? Okay, will you install will you install SharePoint on a single server or not? Remember, in previous versions, and standalone installation was possible. And in those installation, SharePoint used express version of SQL Server. Okay, you are not supposed to install SQL in those cases. Um, that option has gone. That is no more available. You will create. You can still create, or you can still install SharePoint on a single server, but that will be a single server farm. And in order to install a single server farm, you will be required an installation of SQL Server. Okay, so that option is no more available in 2016. You will have to create a farm and you will have to install SQL Server first, whether you go for a single server farm or you go for a full-fledged server farm. If you want to install on multiple server, then you will select main role option. As I discussed that there are multiple roles, the application server role, the search server role, the distributed cache server role, the front end role, and a custom role as well. Okay, which means if you want to perform installation in a very traditional way, as you used to perform in 2010 or 2013, then you will select custom role, and you will in custom role you can install anything on that server, which means you can install web front end services, you can install search services, you can install let's say business connectivity services, any kind of services on that particular server. Okay, so these kind of installations are available in SharePoint 2016. The most scalable solution, once again, it is advised that it is a good option to use at least 3 server. Okay, one for the web front end, one for the application server, and one for the database application server. At least 3 servers. Okay, whether physical or virtualized, it's up to you. Once SharePoint is installed, then you start farm configuration wizard. Okay, which means you want to configure your farm. Okay, the installation means was that it created a farm for you, but now you will be required to configure that farm. The configuration means probably you want to configure the email options, or probably you want to create some more web application, or probably you want to you are supposed to create some service applications like the search service and the user profile service, these kind of services. So these will be the different kind of configurations that you would be able to perform once the farm is created. Once the farm is created, an automatic site will be created as well. A site will be available, and that will be the central administration site. Okay, and that site is available as soon as the farm is created. Okay, so using the central administration site, you can run this configuration wizard, or you can use PowerShell. Okay, yeah, you would be able to perform all those configuration using a SharePoint PowerShell. Okay, let me show you this one very quickly, because you will perform all these steps in your labs. So I will show you very quickly. Let's come to DC on domain controller, and let me create a simple user. For that purpose, I will use Active Directory users in computer. You can use Active Directory Administrative Center as well. Okay, let me use this Active Directory user in computer. Okay, I will create a user. Let's say a very simple user. I will name it SP Farm. Okay, that will be my user. Let me give it a password. Okay, user cannot change the password. Password never expires. And finish. Okay, my AD account is created. Then I will switch to SharePoint server. In SharePoint server, I'm not creating aliases right now because you will create in your labs. So, okay, on this server, Microsoft number one has installed prerequisites. Number two, they have already executed the setup.exe. Okay, the setup file has been executed as well. The role of the setup file is only to copy all the binaries. Okay, that's the whole job of setup.exe. Once the binaries are copied, then it's your job to create SharePoint farm. Okay, and for that purpose, you will use SharePoint product configuration wizard. That's the output of that setup.exe or setup file. Okay, that's it, it's the output. So you will have to run this configuration wizard in order to configure your farm. Okay, stop all the services, whatever you want. You want to connect with existing farm or you want to create a new farm. Okay, because I'm creating a new one, so definitely I will create a new farm. However, in future, if you would like to add some more servers in this farm, so you will select the first option. Okay, your database server name, and it will create a database with this particular name. You can change the name if you want to. Okay, our database server name is, this is our database. This is nyc-db1. Okay, this is the name. So I would say nyc-db1. Okay. Who will be the user or the farm administrator? Remember that we created an account and our domain is Contoso. Okay, this is our domain. So it requires domain name backslash username. So Contoso backslash SP farm. It's not case sensitive, by the way, but okay. And you will provide a passphrase. Very important thing. Remember, in future, if there will be a need to remove something from this farm or to add some new server in this farm, so you will be required to provide passphrase. Okay, so whenever you type it, keep it secretly somewhere. Okay, so you remember it for the future. Okay. Okay, now this is something new. It was not available in 2013 or 2010. Okay, now you will select what kind of installation you want to perform. Do you want to make a specific role, or in this case, I have a one single computer. Okay, so I want to install a custom installation. Okay, the next thing, where on which port would you like to create your central administration? Let me say I will create my central administration on this port. What kind of authentication mechanism you want to use? We will discuss all these options in authentication module. Okay, so I'm not going into this detail. Most of the time, I think you will use NTLM. These are the two Windows authentication mechanism, whether you use NTLM, NT-LAN Manager, or you use Kerberos, negotiate one. Okay, for the Kerberos, you will be required some extra configuration. So we use this NTLM simply. Let's see, next. Summary, and click on next. Okay, so if everything goes well, so we will have a SharePoint installation. Okay, it will take let's say 5-7 minutes. So let's take a 10-minute break and then we will be back. Okay, so it's on task 7. So hopefully it will be done in a while. So okay, so the only change in installation as compared to the previous version is that the role assignment or the min role. Okay, that's the only kind of change in 2016. Rest of the installation is very similar. Okay, by the time it's working, so let me perform one more task. And the task is I will add one more account in Active Directory because I will create some services. Okay, so in order to create those services, I will be required a service account. Okay, so I will create another user. Let me add another user. Let me call it SP services. Okay, once again, you can name it anything, whatever you want to. Let me switch back to SP. It's done. Let me click on finish. So it will open that 50,000 site, okay, which is my SharePoint 2016's central administration site. And if this time, let's say in search, if I type SharePoint, so you will find different kind of things. Let's say one of the icon or the item is the SharePoint Central Admin. So I would be able to run SharePoint Central Admin from here, or probably you can execute that site directly by typing that name in URL. Okay, the PowerShell is there, so you will be able to perform some of the tasks using the PowerShell. Okay, when you first time execute this SharePoint, or you run this SharePoint, so it shows you this option. So we don't want to participate right now in this one. Say no. Okay, so the next option is to start the wizard, which means you want to configure your farm. Okay, the configuration of farm means running different services, probably the service applications, or probably um, you may need to configure email or those kind of things. However, if you want to create some of the service applications, then you can perform that particular task using the farm this farm wizard. What if I say cancel? Okay, and once I say cancel, so which means I don't want to run that farm wizard at this stage. So everything is there. Okay, this is the place Office 365, okay, used to for the hybrid scenarios. Okay, um, rest of thing, like if I go to application management, and inside the application management, if I, let's say, select manage service applications, okay, there is hardly 2 service applications. Remember, this is the required one, the service security token service application, and I'll explain this one in security module. Okay, so these two service applications are there. What if I need some other service applications? For example, usage and health service applications. Okay, so if I need to create a new service application, so I will select this new, and inside this new, you will find different service applications. However, the usage and the health service application is not available over there, over here. Okay, so what I can do, I can rerun that wizard again. So if you want to rerun that wizard, come to this wizard, launch farm configuration wizard. Okay, start the wizard. Because I can create my usage and um, uh, health usage and health data collection service from here. So what I do, I simply unselect. Let's say I want to create translation service as well, for example. Okay, project manager service, project service application is there. It's the newer one. Okay, these are the requirements, so I cannot unselect it. Okay, before that, let me show you one thing. Let's say if we go to databases, and if we open, let's say, Management Studio, and I refresh it, for example, inside the databases, okay, you will find these databases. The first database this first database, SharePoint underscore config, when I was creating the farm, so SharePoint gave me an option to rename it or probably accept that. So I accepted the default option. So this is the configuration database. Make sure that this database has a recovery model of full. Okay. Okay, so we have these two databases. This is for the central administration purposes. Okay. Other than that, we don't have any other database. Okay, let's go back to SharePoint Server. In SharePoint Server, I want to create this usage and health data collection service. Okay, and I want to create another service, let's say translation service. Okay, machine translation service. Okay, it will say that create a new managed account, which means these are the service applications, and in order to run these service application required a pool account. Okay, so if you remember that we created a pool account in our domain contoso /sp services. Okay, it's saying managed account, remember. Okay, and I'll show you in a moment where what is this managed account mean. Okay, so it's there. Let me click on next, and now it will create those services. It won't take that much time, I think. This shouldn't take long. Whenever it says shouldn't, remember, remove this N apostrophe T. Okay. Come on, come on, come on. Mm-hmm. Taking a little while, so just wait a minute. Shouldn't take that much. Okay, in this environment, while you will be performing your lab, so let me give you an idea. You have this domain controller, you have this database server, you have this SharePoint server, and you have this Office Online server. Okay, as I mentioned, which is used to render the Office documents inside the browser, and it will provide some of the functionalities to modify those documents like simple, bold, italic, save, such kind of things will be available inside the browser. So you have these 4 servers. The purpose of this server is to join is simply to join your farm. Okay, you will simply join this server with SharePoint farm. It has a separate licensing, it has a separate installation. You cannot install this OOS inside SharePoint farm. It must be installed on, so with the install, not install SP server on same server where we are retrieving our data. Yeps. The server can be same, Stacy, okay? I would say not the same instance, okay? Which means I can install 2 SQL servers on one computer, on one server. This is possible. But I will specify, or I will fix one instance for SharePoint, and I will not use that particular instance for any other purpose. Yups. Because if you have a very heavy server, for example, with the 16 cores and 32 GB RAM, so probably your DBA will say, I cannot fix this server only for the SharePoint. So you can say, okay, install one more server, one more SQL instance on that, and you will use that particular instance. Okay. So I don't know what is it, what's that doing? Come on, boy. Finally. Wow, good. Okay, so it did something. Let's check what it has done. Okay, it's saying something you want to create site collection at this stage. I don't want to create a site collection. So simply skip. I will skip this step. Okay, if I go to application management and inside the application management, if this time I select manage service applications, so you will find out some more services. Okay, so these are the different service applications. Okay, if I go back to database server, and if I simply refresh, so now we have some more databases. As the name suggests, I can simply figure out this is the database which is used for the translation service. Okay, this is the database which is used for the health service application. Okay, if I take a look on this particular database, for example, the properties of this database, let's say the options. Okay, the recovery model is simple by default. Okay, so ask your database administrator not to play too much with the SharePoint databases. Okay, so our SharePoint is installed. We simply tested the configuration wizard, and remember, we could create those services without the configuration wizard as well. Okay, but I wanted to show you that, so that's why. Okay, if I come back to application management, inside the manage web application, now remember and recall that hierarchy. Now we have a farm. Inside the farm we have service applications. Inside the service application, inside the farm we have web applications. Okay, so what it did, when SharePoint, let's say, created the farm, it created an application, a web application for central admin. Number two, it has created another web application on port 80. Okay, that's the output when you actually execute the wizard, the farm wizard first time. It automatically creates this web application for you. Okay, although I didn't ask to do that, but it does. Um, in separate module, we will explore how to create web applications, by the way. Okay, and we will go into the details of web applications and the site collection kind of things. Let's say if you have this web application, if you have this application, before that, yes, I wanted to show one thing. We used managed account when I was creating, or I was using the farm wizard, and I wanted to create that usage and handle data collection service and the translation service. So it asked me to provide managed account. Remember, in SharePoint, every security account is known as managed account. Okay, for example, if I want to create a web application and I want to use an account for the application pool, so I will have to register that account as a managed account in SharePoint first. Okay, so if you wanted to register any account, so you will select this security, and inside the security you will select this configure managed account. Okay, now we can find these two accounts because when SharePoint was creating the farm, so it automatically registers the farm account as a managed account. And if you use the farm wizard, so farm wizard does the same thing for you. Okay, so what if I want to, I will, when I will create a new web application and I would like to use another kind of account, so I will register that account first over here, and then I will use that account as a security account in SharePoint, which means as a application pool account in SharePoint. Okay. Let me come on. It's working slowly. So our SharePoint is installed. Okay, so that was the process of installing SharePoint.